Star Network. Folks, we got a lot to talk about for this first hour. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with this recent invasion of Russian forces into the country of Ukraine. We'll bring you up to speed on some of the latest developments with this situation and what President Biden has to say, all while keeping in mind of the implications and the impact that it's going to make us here in America. We'll have that conversation. Also, we'll talk about how a father is now under charges for instructing his 4-year-old to shoot at police in Utah. Man, oh man, we'll have that discussion. And then later, how the Interior Department is now doing its part to bring equality by removing some derogatory names of that offended Native American women from federal land and property. We'll have all of that and a whole lot more, of course, with the Culture Crew. So stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we got to jump right into it because things are developing and moving fast it has been announced earlier today that Russia has officially invaded the country of Ukraine. And President Biden has just finished giving his remarks just a few minutes ago about how America is going to respond to this situation. Now, based upon what we already know, that Russian President Vladimir Putin has decided to call for his forces, his troops, his military to move forward pretty much on all sides of Ukraine, attacking the country from land, air, and sea. And there are troops that have come in from the southern border as well as the eastern region to encircle the country. There are reports that are about 150,000 troops that are on the ground encircling the country of Ukraine. What's the big reason as to why Russian President Putin is deciding to move forward? Well, he says that enough is enough, that there are parts of the Ukraine country that belong to Russia that he has designated as to being independent, and that there are parts that are showing that Russia needs to be from under any type of aggression or control from Ukraine and the West. Now, given that this is a new development of this invasion, there has certainly been some history around this situation. The history is the fact that there for the past 2 years, there has been talks from Russia and other allies and other countries in that region about what is going to happen. How is Russia dealing with this situation of Ukraine? And President Putin has been giving people some slight hint that there would be an invasion, but there was certainly some faith that the invasion would not happen as quickly as it has been happening today. I want you to take a look here really quickly at what President Biden had to say as a result of this attack. Because the president is saying that one of the big things he's saying is that since Russia has made this move that he calls both unprovoked and unjustified, that now it's going to force NATO and the United States and other countries to say enough is enough. Check out some of the big decisions that the president had to make in implementing sanctions to try to stop this invasion from becoming an all-out war.
I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim success for its military operation against a made-up threat. But history has shown, time and again, how swift gains in territory eventually give way to grinding occupations, acts of mass civil disobedience, and strategic dead ends. The next few weeks and months will be hard on the people of Ukraine. Putin has unleashed a great pain on them, but the Ukrainian people have known 30 years of independence. They have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world. Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now, the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about a genuine security concerns on their part. It was always about naked aggression, about Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors through coercion and corruption, by changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause. Putin's actions betray his sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies. They cannot be erased from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation. They endure. In the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation, make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine. May God protect our troops.
That was President Biden earlier this afternoon giving his remarks and kind of going into more detail about some of the big decisions, more importantly, the big economic sanctions that will be placed on Russia. I want to break it down for you folks. And again, I would highly encourage you to listen to what the president said. He only spoke for, it wasn't long, probably about 20 minutes or so. But some of the big things that we gleaned from his remarks is that the United States would cut off Russia's largest banks and largest companies from the Western financial markets and would restrict exports of technology to Russia. Along with that, saying that he would vastly degrade the country's ability to thrive in the weeks, months, and years ahead. He also said that the United States was freezing trillions of dollars in Russian assets, including the funds controlled by Russian elites and their families. And one of the big concerns that people have been saying, that correspondents around the world have saying, is that Putin is only concerned not about the economy for the average Russian citizen, but are concerned about the money of the oligarchs in that country. So the president is saying that the United States was freezing trillions of dollars, including the funds controlled by Russian elites and their families, making them pay for what he calls a premeditated attack against a free nation in Europe. The president also said that he is authorized sending more troops to Eastern European countries in the NATO alliance. Now, while he vowed again that American troops will not engage with Russia in Ukraine, he did say that the United States would defend its NATO allies if Russia moved beyond Ukraine's border. I want to bring in one of our Culture Crew members, Nira Muhammad, who is a writer. She's an activist, and she's host of Queen Talks with Nira podcast that can be heard, and get her take on this as we have this discussion, because there's a lot to take in, a lot of moving pieces in this whole scenario. And I think we need to have some very, very big discussions about it. Nira, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. It's always good to have you.
It's always great to be here, Farajii. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we get to, let's do this. Before we get to you, let's take a quick pause. When we come back, let's have the conversation about what is the next steps, or what do you think what do you suspect may happen over these next few hours, especially around this issue. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, more conversation about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the show, folks. We're talking about the Russian invasion of the country of Ukraine, bring you up to speed on the latest developments in this situation. There are a number of moving parts, and what we've heard earlier today was President Biden vowing that something will be done. The United States will not sit idly by. The United States will take action as a result of Russian President Vladimir Putin making what the President Biden calls an unjustified, unprovoked attack on a democratic, independent, sovereign nation. And we're going to have a discussion about how this is going to impact not just the world, but those of us here in the country, here at home. I'm joined by Nira Muhammad, my wife, who is a author, who is a educator, and she's host of Queen Talks with Nira podcast that can be heard widely. Nira, thank you again for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Farajii.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a very interesting moment that I think we are finding ourselves in. And when we look at all that President Biden said in his address earlier this afternoon, I mean, there seems to be, and I think people are going to be kind of like very nervous about how this thing is going to play out. What's your take on this?
I want to first start off with the fact that there are so many different reasons as to why this war has started. I thought it was interesting because I said Obama. Biden pointed out that Putin, felt as though Ukraine, had nuclear weapons, or there was some reason, there was some safety measures. There's weapons that we've never found. But then I was looking at USA Today, and they're saying that Putin claims the objective of the attack is to defend the Russian speakers in Ukraine. That's one reason. Then there's another reason. Putin said he views the prospect of Ukraine joining the Western military alliance a hostile act. Then, as I was watching NBC News today, analysts are saying that Putin started this war because he doesn't like the leadership or the president in Ukraine. So that's 4 different reasons right there, or excuses rather, that Putin has now given as to why he's even going to war with Ukraine, which already shows us that there's something more going on. There's something nefarious going on. As Biden pointed out, this is about Putin wanting more power, wanting more land. So all these different excuses and reasons that were given, it's a big red flag that, NATO may have to get involved. NATO's already moving troops into Eastern Europe. They have not landed in Ukraine as of yet, but this is something where even U.S. troops are being called into Eastern Europe. So I think this is something that, we may be thinking like, oh, we're in America, this doesn't affect us. This does affect us. This affects us on so many different levels, from our economy to gas, oil prices, to inflation, to trade, our economy. I mean, there's so many different layers to this. So we really need to be paying attention. We need to have our eyes wide open, because our troops are also going to be sent into Eastern Europe, and they're on standby. It may have to go into Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, that's the concerning part for me, Nira. That is the concerning part, because just as much as the president has made it very clear saying, look, we are not going to get involved, in saying that the United States will not get involved. For example, the U.S. is going to deploy, additional troops and forces to Germany, but President Biden says they are not going to fight in Ukraine, but to defend NATO countries.
Yep.
And one thing
they're already surprised at how far Putin went into Ukraine. They didn't expect him to go in as far as he did. So Putin is already showing off a little bit. He's already kind of like throwing it out there to see, okay, let me see how far I can go and see what the response is going to be. When analysts were asked, and this is coming from NBC News today, when they were asked, well, why did he go as far as he did and stop where he stopped? The response was, because he's waiting to see what NATO's response is going to be. He's waiting to see what the UK's response is going to be. He's waiting to see what America's response is going to be. So this is a game of chess for Putin. This is something that he's wanted to do for a very long time. Be damned of what's going on in Russia. There are protests happening right now in Russia, because not everyone is for this war. And we have to think about that. This is not going to be a situation where everyone in Russia is like, oh, yes, take over Ukraine. There are a lot of people in Russia who have family that live in in Ukraine. So this is a situation where they're on the fence. They're caught in the middle because these are two countries that have very, very close relations. These are two countries whose cultures are very, very intermingled. So there's a lot of moving parts in the situation.
Neil, what do you take from the fact that, and I agree with you, there are a lot of moving parts, but what do you take from how this whole how President Biden is handling this situation? And again, this is constantly evolving, and we know that things can certainly change, but the president is really, instead of sending troops, he's cutting off money. He's cutting off financial institutions. He's already said that he's cutting off Russia's largest financial institution, which is the Cyberbank, and 25 of subsidies from the U.S. financial system.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that, he's planning to freeze the assets, the trillions of dollars worth of assets to elite Russian families. Do you think that's enough to stop the bombs from dropping?
Absolutely not. Someone was actually just asked this question, and they just pointed out that Putin has a lot of gold. A lot of the people that are backing Putin has a lot of gold. They have a lot of money. They don't care at this point. Right now, they don't care. And also SWIFT, which is a big part of Biden was asked, why is SWIFT not being cut off? If you don't know what SWIFT is, it's pretty much like Venmo for the world. It's a way of trading money. It helps the economy. It's not going to happen. The UK is saying they're not for cutting off SWIFT. Why? Because that will negatively impact their economy. So when you have a situation where there are a lot of countries or a lot of our people that are part of our countries that are part of our alliance and a part of NATO, that are saying, hey, we can't cut this off because a lot of our economy, including China, is wrapped up in Russia. So that's something that we have to look at. I think that Russia expected these changes to come. I think they expected America to respond in the ways they did. So I think we're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be very, very aggressive. But I think my biggest concern is when we're talking about cutting Russia off on money, the other big concern is, of course, the cyber attacks. Mm-hmm. The cyber attacks are very real. We saw Russia's power back in the 2016 election. We saw it again in the 2020 election, when the cyber attacks were at its height. And we know that Facebook and social media has played a huge role, and unbeknownst to them, that they were used as tools for Russia to infiltrate, to put out various messages that were for President Trump and in other places. So the cyber attacks are real. And when the president, I know he said it in his press conference today that he's going to get to the bottom of the cyber attacks, that he's going to deal with that issue. But he's not as concerned because he feels confident about the money. But the cyber attacks, how concerned should we be about cyber attacks at this point?
I mean, cyber attacks are a real thing. Right now, the cyber attacks are happening in the Ukraine, even down to the school systems. So when you think about, people are like, okay, well, it's not money. It may not be the banking system. But when you think about the disruption of even the school system, that's pretty scary, because that's when you start to get into the day-to-day lives of even children. So if they're, taking it that far to disrupt school systems, we should be worried. We definitely should be worried. I will say social media has, in some cases, been playing a positive role in what's going on, because I just learned today that TikTok has been very, very, and I mean, just like the people of Ukraine, the everyday citizens have been really capturing what's going on the ground and posting to TikTok. Yeah. I just found out that TikTok is actually now the #1 social media platform in the world. I did not know that. So I do think there are negatives and positives to social media. I think a lot of social justice movements have gotten off the ground thanks to social media. So, in some ways, we know social media can be a gift and a curse, but right now it's looking like TikTok is being very helpful, because it's helping us to really see what's actually happening. And it's from the perspective of the actual citizens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we're going to take another pause. When we come back, more conversations about this attack in Ukraine by Russia. I'm going to share with you some more of your I wanted to share with you some more of your comments about this situation. And we're going to continue to have our discussion with Culture crew member Neil Muhammad. So stay with us. A lot coming at you for the second 30 of the Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the show, folks. We have been talking about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Now, this is a very, very big topic with moving parts, a lot to consider, a lot to understand, and we're going to do our part here on The Culture to break it down for you so you can understand it, or at least have some knowledge about what is going on right there in the Ukraine, what is going on in Russia, and most importantly, how all of this is going to affect us here at home. Now, I've been talking to Culture Crew member Nira Muhammad, and she's been bringing us up to speed on some of the things that are happening on the ground. But then you got to also think about what the president has said. I want to play for you once again, for those who haven't had the opportunity to hear President Biden's remarks earlier today, just a small excerpt of President Biden and what he plans to do now that Russia has invaded Ukraine. Check this out.
Pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim success for its military operation against a made-up threat. But history has shown, time and again, how swift gains in territory eventually give way to grinding occupations, acts of mass civil disobedience, and strategic dead ends. The next few weeks and months will be hard on the people of Ukraine. Putin has unleashed a great pain on them, but the Ukrainian people have known 30 years of independence. They have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world. Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now, the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about a genuine security concerns on their part. It was always about naked aggression, about Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors through coercion and corruption, by changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause. Putin's actions betray his sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies. They cannot be erased by from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation. They endure. In the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation, make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine. May God protect our troops.
That was just some of the remarks given by President Biden earlier this afternoon in response to the invasion. I want to share, and I want to go back to Culture Crew member Nir Muhammad to get her take on, just what the president said. Nira, the president is taking a hardcore stance at it. I mean, we talked a little bit about, the cutoff from financial institutions, but one of the big things that sticks out for me in that excerpt was the fact that he said, that any country that is associated with Russia will be stained. Mm-hmm. Then he took a historical perspective and saying that you siding with Putin at this point is going to be, basically he's saying like you're going to be on the wrong side of history. Mm-hmm. Is it too early to have this part of to say that? Is that premature, or is this setting up an antagonizing situation where the United States may be dragged into another world war?
I don't think that it's too bold to say. I think it's a situation where it is what it is. You will have a stain on your country if you go into backing Putin. At this point, Putin regards Ukraine and Russia as inseparable, one people, a single whole. That's the whole purpose of this. He simply wants Ukraine to be dependent in one nation with Russia. That is not a reason to invade a country. This is about power. This is not about, a fear that the Ukraine is going to hurt Russia. No, they're not. They're simply wanting independence of Russia. Russia doesn't want that. And they're saying, okay, well, I'm going to move right in. It's giving me Kanye and Kim vibes. I mean, seriously. You just decided, oh, you want to leave me? I'm going to move across the street. Oh, you think you're going to go be a part of NATO? I see that as you're going against Russia. Like
Yeah.
this is literally Putin's ego. This is about you not wanting Ukraine to be independent of Russia. That's not a reason to disrupt so many lives. There are millions of people trying to flee the Ukraine. There are people literally sleeping in subway stations in the Ukraine for safety. This is absolutely insane. For you to
Yeah.
just say, "Oh, we're one country, we're one nation. That's it. Oh, you don't want to be one nation with us? We're going to invade." I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that's part of, and we can just take a look at these images, folks. Just this is bombing from early this morning.
5 o'clock in the morning.
Take a look at this. It gives me, if anybody remember the whole quote unquote shock and awe campaign when America went into Iraq. Y'all remember that? It was just like it was like before sunrise. I remember reporters saying on TV that there were so many bombs and so many flares and so many explosions, the light was lit up like the sun had already risen. So it gives me, I mean, war is never a pretty situation, because once those bombs drop, somebody's life is being taken, somebody's home
There
is
have
being
been
destroyed.
casualties already. There have
There
been
are a number of
casualties. We don't have those
casualties.
exact numbers.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pull up those numbers. But the other part of this, and this is something that I think we need to put out there, dear, is the fact that there are a number of thousands of protesters have already taken to the streets and squares of major Russian cities, from Moscow and other cities across the region, to protest the fact that President Putin was wrong to make such a decision, and to wake up to the fact that their government is bombing a country that they have seen and have been told is a quote unquote brotherly country, a brotherly nation. And at those protests, protesters have been met with major resistance by Russian law enforcement, Russian police, and people are pushing back, and they're just in a state of shock. Russians, and I'm saying the average Russian citizens, according to the reports, are in a state of shock. Young Russian citizens are saying, what in the world is going on? And protesters are becoming the enemy to the Russian government. Again, it gives me when I heard about the protesters, it made me think about when President Trump was in office and he decided to walk across the street to take that infamous picture of him holding the Bible in front of that church in DC across the street from the White House. But before he went out there, they put tear gas on American citizens who were protesting him and his administration. He tear gassed those individuals right there in front of the White House, so simply he can make way for him to take this photo out. And I mean, we're seeing this. We're seeing that when citizens are rising up against their government, they're being met with heavy resistance. And we're seeing this type of behavior. And I'm wondering, how long will the people take on this type of governance? How long will the people continue to just allow this to happen?
I mean, that just goes to show how important having a democracy is. Putin has literally been in power for over 20 years in Russia. So he's not a new leader. He's been there, as I just said, over 20 years. And so this may push Russia into, a civil war. I mean, we don't know at this point. It's too early to say. But yes, there is a lot of resistance from the Russian people, because they're saying, again, we don't want this war. I just was listening about a mother and a daughter who live in Moscow. Her husband and family members live in the Ukraine, and they can't get to their family right now. So this is a situation where a lot of people from the Ukraine and from Russia are very much so connected. They are family, they are friends, they are neighbors. They have a strong connection. They share a lot of the strong culture. But that does not mean, Putin, that just because you share a culture, that it's like, oh, if you're not going to be with us, we're just going to destroy you completely. We'll just completely take over. That is not the way that democracy works. And so we probably will see a change come out of Russia in the near future. We may not, but that is something to think about, because the people are saying this is not what we want, and Putin is saying, I don't care, this is what I want. So
and you know what? And this is, this is part of the reason why. And I understand the president. I really do understand the president for wanting to protect Ukraine, which is a NATO ally, to wanting to be there.
mm-hmm.
But you and I both know, you study history, you read, you have researched this stuff. You and I both know, in order for any country to go to war, you must have the political will of the people behind that decision.
Farajii, if anyone has ever studied the Romanovs, in the last czars of Russia, this is giving me those type of vibes. The people, it's like Nicholas did not listen to the people. He listened to his uncle. He didn't want to listen to his advisors who were telling him this is not what the people of Russia want. The people of Russia are not to play with. When they are tired and when they are fed up, and I'm talking about from history, when they're fed up with even their own government, they will take action. So again, Putin has to go back. He's stuck in this Cold War, with the Cold War. He's stuck on wanting to get Ukraine back. He has to move out of that. He needs to look at history, the history of Russia, what happened to the last czars, and look at, they're not to play with. These are people who, they love their country. Their patriotism is very, very strong in Russia. Putin is not making his citizens happy. And so again, just looking at history, I think that he should be taking more into account what his people want.
Absolutely. I want to go to some of these comments there so people can understand, and people that have been a part of this chat. And I'm looking at our YouTube chat, and folks continue to post your comments, and we're continuing to have this discussion. Ken checked in and said, prepare for gas prices to spiral out of control. Hyperinflation is coming, people. And we haven't even talked about that. We haven't talked about
it's already happening. Friday,
it's not already happening. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, that America, when it comes in terms of producing oil, America, we're one of the top 3 areas, the top 3 countries for producing oil. It's America, it's Saudi Arabia, it's actually Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Russia is there, folks. As of right now, everybody knows this, and it's been reported today. Market has gone down. Oil prices about to go up. So regardless of what part of
when oil prices go up, when oil prices go up, we have to think about how many other systems that affects. We've already been talking about the price of food going up. I believe the company that owns like Kellogg's, what is that company called? The big the company that owns like Kellogg's and a bunch of other organizations, Capri Suns, so many things that we buy and we put in our kids' lunch boxes every single day. We just got a notification that the cost of all those items are going up. So you go to the store now, there are juice boxes that I can't even find. The shelves are bare, and you have to think about how that affects things getting delivered. A lot of these things will take a lot of big trucks, a lot of trucking companies. If oil prices are going up, that also affects how quickly things are getting to, your local supermarket. You have to think about how that also affects our economy. So again, American citizens, we may be thinking, oh, this is happening in Russia, this is happening in the Ukraine. This does not affect us. It does. It affects us down to what you are putting in your child's lunchbox and how much you are spending on the food that you eat, how much money you're spending on the gas that you put in your car. This affects us on so many different levels. We have to stay woke, for lack of better words, because again, these things are trickling down to the very things that we use every single day.
A10 Warthog says American kids going to defend someone else's border, and Democrats are just fine with that. Meanwhile, on the southern United States border, COVID pouring in. I don't know what that means, because COVID is coming from everywhere. So I'm not sure what that means, A10. But the fact of American kids going to defend someone else's border, that is something that the president has said that is not planning to happen as of yet. I mean, of course, in any warlike situation, folks, or any war, things change rapidly. Decisions are made. One decision is made today, another one can be made 12 hours from now. Y'all know it like that. I know it. Nira knows it. We know that. So we really do have to be prepared for the unexpected. Hardboy said, look, the U.S. always sticks its nose in everybody's business and World War III would be on U.S. hands, keep in mind the media lie and only show a half biased side of the news to ignite the flame. Nira, I want to get to you, and I'm Hardboy. I appreciate you saying that because I do think it's important that in 2022 that we are very cognizant and intentional about where we get our news from, what sources we use. We have to be intentional about making sure that we do. If you see something posted on social media, that you fact check that that story. How do we make sure that in the midst of all of this news and quote unquote that we don't become victims of propaganda, we don't become victims of lies, and then we start acting on those lies and propaganda?
Oh my goodness, it's the same thing that I tell my students. Anytime you're looking up something or you're learning something new, you always cross-reference it. You never, ever, ever use simply one source. You always cross-reference it. Personally, I don't like to cross-reference with just two sources. I like to go into 3 to 5, but I'm a Virgo and I'm a kind of an overachiever. So when I go down that rabbit hole of research, I really go down that rabbit hole. But you really do have to look at some of those more reputable news sources. If you're looking at a news source that, you know, it could be just an op-ed, it could be an opinion piece, that's something to think about. Who's given this op-ed? Who's given this opinion? Why does their opinion matter? It could, you know, this could just be someone sitting in their living room just making up stuff and spreading, you know, propaganda, or it could be a journalist whose research is on the ground running and they're giving you a firsthand op-ed about what they're seeing on the ground. So again, you have to look at your sources. You have to check. I personally like to use like USA Today. There are a lot of different sources that you can use. But again, I like to use the more reputable ones. And I also like to use multiple different ones. I don't ever just look at one source and take what they say as face value. You have to check multiple sources.
The big things that I think that is important, along with checking multiple sources, check sources outside of the United States as well, right?
Oh, definitely.
Of course, here on the Black Star Network, you want to keep your eyeballs, you want to keep your ears open for the sources that we bring. But we're trying to bring in a very comprehensive view of these circumstances because we know that certain sources outside of the U.S. is a little bit more trustworthy versus some of the sources inside the U.S. So you do have to pick and choose. But again, be very, very intentional. Let me continue to add. Putin is not doing. This is from Tanya Starr. She says Putin is not doing anything that the U.S. hasn't. How do? And I think that is also a big part of this conversation, Nira. When we look at, you know, when President Biden stands before the American people and says that this country is always going to fight for freedom, this country is always going to fight for doing what's right by the people. As Black people in this country, we have to now have to deal with this double identity that we have, which is we are a part of this country, but then we are also victims of this country because we do know that this country can speak of moral goals and high values, but then at the same time do some shady stuff. How do we reconcile between those two moments in a moment like this?
I mean, we have to look at it and take it for face value. We know the horrors of our country, we know the history of our country, but that is not what's on the table right now. That is not the issue that is at hand at this moment. I think that we have to spread a little bit of humanity as well. Yes, we care about what's going on with us and our community, but we do have to also look at what's going on in the world because we are part of a global society. We're part of this world as much as we want to have people that support us. Just like when George Floyd was happening, we had protests that were happening all over the world. And so just in these same instances, we have to look at it just like that. Absolutely.
Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to have more conversation about this. I know I got a lot more people that have posted their thoughts on YouTube and other social media platforms. So stay with us. We got a lot to get to. You're tuned into The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. For the second hour, we want to continue to have our conversation about this very, very important and big situation of Russia invading the Ukraine and what this means for us here back at home in America. We've been talking to Culture Crew member Nir Muhammad, and now we're going to be joined by Dr. Gerald Horne, who serves as a professor at the University of Houston. Dr. Horne has done research addressing issues of race in a variety of relationships involving labor, politics, civil rights, and war. And we're happy to have him join us for this conversation this afternoon. Dr. Horne, thank you so much, sir, for being on The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Dr. Horne, as we look at this situation, we know about some of the peripheral issues that are popping up. We do know that, for example, President Biden has decided to move and implement economic sanctions. We also know that there have been protesters on the streets of Moscow and in other parts of Russia. We also know that the Ukrainian people are suffering, a number of casualties, and that the bombs are still dropping. But I think the big question mark of this whole conversation, Dr. Horne, is what does this all mean for us here back at home, especially when you have an America that is so divided already politically?
Well, I think the country will be divided even further. What does it mean for the people in the United States? Well, first of all, our tax dollars are going for arms that are being shipped as we speak to the Ukraine, which is equivalent to throwing gasoline on the fire. And there is a distinct possibility that this conflict will not simply be limited to a conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Recall that what helped to trigger this controversy is the fact that Moscow objected to the possibility that Ukraine would join the US-dominated North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Likewise, Moscow objected to the fact that there are US missiles surrounding Russia, and they wanted those missiles pulled back. Just like in 1962, the United States threatened to blow up the world because the Soviet Union had placed missiles in Cuba. The world almost was blown up, and we're in an analogous situation today as we speak.
So, Dr. Horn, given that this is actually a relationship, in I feel like at any time there is a war that happens in any parts of the world, the United States has its hand in it in some way, shape, or form. With these economic sanctions, with the direction that the President Biden is taking, do you foresee that it will just stop there, or are we going to be dragged into another war?
Well, another war is a distinct possibility, but this may be the mother of all wars because we're talking about two nuclear armed forces, Moscow on the one hand, Washington on the other. But even if a war does not take place, I think you also need to bring into focus the giant that is lurking off screen. I'm speaking of the People's Republic of China. I think that if we survive this crisis, future historians will well ask, how was it that Washington, beginning with Obama and Hillary Rodham Clinton and continuing with Biden, kept talking about a pivot to Asia and confronting China, which by some measures has a larger economy than that of the United States, but yet somehow Washington keeps getting detoured and now is bogged down on this Ukraine-Russia border, which means that if things go in this direction, China might be the ultimate beneficiary of this conflict.
And how significant is that? Can you break that down for our watchers, Dr. Horn? How significant is it that we make sure that China stays in a place that benefits the United States? How significant is that?
Well, even before this conflict, it's possible to say that that is not in the cards, I'm afraid to say. Sometimes it's difficult to reverse the tides of history. Recall that this week marks the 50th anniversary of Richard M. Nixon, the then U.S. president's journey to China, where he helped to effectuate an anti-Moscow coalition with China. And in return, China received massive foreign direct investment from the United States. Entire manufacturing plants floated across the Pacific that has now created this juggernaut. As noted, even before the crisis of today, it was unclear if the United States would be able to reverse that particular trend. Now, with this brush fire erupting on the Ukraine-Russia border, it becomes even more difficult to predict that trend will be reversed. That is to say, somehow trying to keep China out of the passing lane, or in fact, exceeding the United States of America.
And with that, I mean, because for some of us may know that the relationship between the United States and China is a very close relationship. We're getting everything from products and services. And, you know, like you're saying, China has actual ownership in this country. And so, you know, the question was asked, I remember, to President Biden earlier today, and after his remarks, you know, he was asked, Mr. President, will you try to convince China to not get involved? And he said, I can't speak to that right now.
Well, he can't speak to it because I doubt if it will happen. Recall that it was just a few weeks ago, on February 4th, 2022, at the opening of the Beijing Olympics, you saw a boycott, diplomatic boycott that is, by the United States and its allies. But front and center with President Xi Jinping of China was President Putin of Russia. They issued a 5,000-word statement that basically suggests that this is a new alliance. And going forward, you're going to have a face-off between the North Atlantic Alliance, which has been dominating world politics for hundreds of years, speaking of the United States and its Western European allies. But there is a new kid on the block, if you like, that is to say this Xi-Putin alliance. And it's unclear to me which alliance will prevail. Certainly, it's difficult for the United States to confront China because you'd have to confront Microsoft, Apple, GM, KFC, Tesla, all the other U.S. corporations that are so heavily invested in the People's Republic of China. So to a certain extent, from Washington's point of view, if you want to get at China somehow, you have to do it through indirection. That is to say, by weakening its closest ally, which happens to be Russia.
So give us a context, Dr. Horn. How scary would it be for a China-Russian alliance? How scary would that be for the United States?
Well, it depends what the United States' intentions are. If the United States' intentions are peaceful, well, it should be no problem. However, that has not been the recent history of the United States of America. I need only remind you of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. You have a lot of blather on the media nowadays about how this being the first eruption on the European continent since World War II, since 1945. They must have forgotten what happened a few decades ago in the former Yugoslavia, when the United States bombed Serbia into smithereens and helped to serve as midwife to the birth of a new nation, speaking of Kosovo, over the objection, by the way, of Moscow. And recall as well that the United States destroyed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade during that unfortunate conflict, which was like a punch in the nose to the People's Republic of China. So if that latter trend continues, well, I'm not sure what the fate of the small planet will be.
Dr. Hunt, I have to say that this is very scary. This is very scary. Now, I know that another part of your research and your work, sir, is on race matters and race issues in this country. And I'm wondering, where do Black people fit into this? Where do minorities of this country fit into this larger situation? If America decides to move forward with some sort of military action, we know that there are a number of Black and brown and my other minorities that will be caught up into this situation. Where do we fit?
Well, first of all, it's our tax dollars that are going across the Atlantic to the Ukraine. Recall as well that our community is disproportionately hit by homelessness. And it makes no sense, to me at least, to spend money on war and conflict in Eastern Europe when you have tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of homeless people, many of whom are Black, who are sleeping outside. So obviously our priorities are in the wrong place. But sadly enough, one of the things that I've noticed in recent years is that there is little attention by many of our political leaders, by many of our intellectual stars, to international affairs in general. They have little or nothing to say about China in the passing lane, little or nothing to say about the rise of Russia in recent years. And so in some ways, this is a case, pardon the expression, of chickens coming home to roost as far as the Black community is concerned.
How should we stand? Should we stand in resistance, like we're seeing happening in the streets of Moscow with protesters are resisting? I'm seeing some people even saying, Dr. Horn, that this is not our war, saying this is not a Black people's war. I'm wondering if that's the correct sentiment that we need to have at this point.
It depends on what they mean by that. If they mean that they do not want the U.S. government to get involved directly in this conflict, well, I agree with them. But I think that we need to look at the trigger of this conflict. The trigger, to repeat, was the possibility that Russia's closest neighbor, Ukraine, would enter a U.S.-dominated military alliance, speaking of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and then would have missiles placed in Ukraine aimed at the capital, Moscow. Now, that is our concern, because the logic of that could ultimately lead to World War III and the extinction of all humanity. So it depends on what people mean by saying this is not our war.
I want to bring back Culture Crew member Nira Muhammad, and also we are joined now by another Culture Crew member, Rashad Staten, who is an educator and activist as well. Nira, I want to go to you with your question, your thoughts for Dr. Gerald Horn. What's your question?
I just really want to thank him for making the point that, oh no, you guys can't see me. That's weird.
Okay,
Yeah, you can go to Rashad for 1 second.
All right, let's go to Rashad. Rashad, thank you so much for checking in, brother. We've been talking about this invasion by Russia, the implications of it from the relationship that America has with China, America has with Russia, and the impact that it makes on us as the American people. What's your question for Dr. Gerald Horn?
Yeah, Doc, my particular question, I think you already nailed on it, is how do we make this global issue more so digestible for our common folk, right? In our communities, while we're being distracted by the realities of a global pandemic, while still dealing with all of the uphills and the barriers and our way of trying to define and find some sustainability. How do we take what this global issue is and the possibility of what we're saying, a World War III? How do we translate this into shop talks at our barbershops, our salons, in our communities? How do we take these high-level interpolitical type of conversation and make it digestible for our young people to see the implications and how it directly impact them in the years to come?
Well, I hope young people realize that World War III would mean the extinction of all humanity. That means all of us are dead. Now, I'm not sure how to simplify that even further. Perhaps you have an idea of how to simplify that. But that's basically what we're staring at right now. I mean, hopefully that won't happen. Mr. Biden says that he does not intend to commit troops to Eastern Europe. But as you know, wars oftentimes happen by flukes. They happen by happenstance. It's just like
they happen by lies too, Dr. Horn.
When they happen by lies. So we have to take this very seriously. I'm afraid to say that our political and intellectual leaders have not been taking these issues seriously. That's why they get paid, in fact, in order to provide some light and leadership. I'm not sure if they've been doing that. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons we're on the cusp of catastrophe.
And Dr. Horn, and that's a great question. And I think one of the other parts about this, Dr. Horn, is trying to figure out, we're in such a deeply partisan, highly politically divided space in this country. And now not only is this coming up during an election year, you have a man like former President Trump, who has basically shown his admiration and basically said, oh my goodness, what Putin is doing is absolutely fantastic. He's a genius, calling him a genius. and even more importantly, this is, and Dr. Horn, you can check me, you can school me, because I'm open to it, sir. But I think that this guy is going to be a huge part of the country moving into a very, very dangerous space, because he got so many GOP members behind him. He scares them. He got them behind him. And at the end of the day, if one of the biggest candidates running for president is siding with an enemy of America right now, and the party that he represents sides with an enemy of America right now, this seems to be, like, the big T word comes to my mind, treason. This seems to be a very high level of betrayal. And I don't know if the country can afford this, nor can they address the double standard of hypocrisy if something is not said about Donald Trump.
Well, first of all, Donald Trump received 75 million votes in the last presidential election, 2020. A significant percentage of the Euro-American population actually thinks that he won the election and that the current U.S. president, Joseph Biden, is illegitimate. In fact, in Wisconsin and other states, they're now engaged in maneuvers somehow to remove Joseph R. Biden from office. Certainly, if the Republicans retake the House and the Senate in November, there will probably be impeachment proceedings against not only Joseph R. Biden, but Vice President Harris as well. Place that on top of this international crisis, and obviously you have a recipe for continued unrest, continued instability, and at the same time, bearing down on Washington is a truckers' convoy, not unlike that which tied up Ottawa, Canada, due north for weeks on end. Just a few days ago, in fact, to a certain extent, it's continuing. You saw Trump hats, you saw Confederate flags, you saw neo-Nazi paraphernalia. So we're in a very serious situation right now in the United States of America, and I'm not even sure if our community is ready for it.
Is there a way that we can get prepared?
It's hard, because it's like you've been smoking 3 packs of cigarettes for 30 years, and then you show up at the doctor and ask for a miracle cure. I mean, it did not, this crisis did not begin overnight. It's been going on for decades. The lack of political education has been going on for decades. The inattention to international affairs has been going on for decades. And so it's very difficult when the wolf is at the door to suddenly begin crying and hollering. Having said that, obviously, we need to keep the pressure on to make sure U.S. troops are not committed to Eastern Europe. We have to ask and demand that our political representatives and demand that the White House issue a statement saying that the United States does not want Ukraine to enter the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And obviously, the United States needs to negotiate with Moscow about all these missiles surrounding Russia, which is a trigger for the current crisis.
This is, folks, we've been talking to Dr. Gerald Horne about this situation that has unfolded in the Ukraine with Russia invading Ukraine. I want to see if we can bring back Nira. Nira, are you with us now? I know you had some tech issues.
I am here.
Okay, awesome. I want to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts or post your questions with Dr. Horne as well.
Oh, I'm like, I don't know what just happened. Like my computer is being really weird, you guys. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to add to when you were asking the doctor about how important it is for, Black people are saying, this isn't our fight. This isn't a time for us to get involved. But I do want us to really take a moment to look at the seriousness of this. Russia has over 6,000 nuclear weapons. We in America have over 5,000, I believe 5,550 as of January. As he mentioned, if we go to a nuclear war, this is very serious for us. This is like don't look up the movie. Like this really could destroy humanity. So while we may say, oh, this isn't a black or fight, this is not about color. This is about humanity. This is about the human race. So again, a nuclear war would be disastrous for all of mankind. So we got to stop always thinking about things as being black or white and really look at what this means for us. And again, this war, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, has trickled down to even our pockets. So we may not feel like we're directly impacted by this, but if you drive a car and you have to put gas in it, you're impacted. If you go to the grocery store and you buy groceries, which I'm pretty sure most of us do, you are impacted. Anytime our economy is affected by the larger global economy, you are impacted. So we have to get out of this thinking that we can live in these little bubbles and that, what's happening in the rest of the world doesn't affect us when it does.
Dr. Horne, can you speak to that about the fact of, putting it in black and white terms and in terms of the people, that this is a human rights issue, not just a black and white issue, and more importantly, that our livelihoods are going to be upended because of this move across the waters?
Well, Sister Nira is right on. I mean, obviously, gasoline prices at the pump are going up. I saw a headline the other day that said it's over $6 a gallon in Los Angeles as we speak. Russia is a major energy producer. You might have noticed that as of this moment, the Europeans, who are heavily dependent upon Russian natural gas and Russian petroleum, have not put sanctions on those two sectors. If they are compelled to do so, I could easily see the price of gasoline a gallon at the pump going up to $7-8 a gallon. And obviously, if you drive a car, that's going to impact you. Even if you don't drive a car, it ties into what buses, public transportation has to pay for their fuel. It ties into what airplanes have to pay for their fuel. There is one unitary market with regard to natural gas. In these waning days of winter, if you heat your home by oil or natural gas, you may have to pay more. I mean, I think that this idea that you can sort of blockade a good deal of the world and say it's not a black issue, that's the sort of thinking that's led us to the brink of the catastrophe in the first instance and needs to be done away with right now, full stop.
I'm in awe, sir. I'm really in awe, Dr. Horne, because, at the end of the day, I think that a lot of us, we're in a time where we're not just conversations, but when we see these type of events happening in the world around us, we don't take enough time to say, wait a minute, hold up. Everything else gets muddled into it. We're worrying about entertainment stuff. We're worrying about sports stuff. We're worried about all of these other things. But when a situation like this is right there front and center, and I think to Rashad's point, was said earlier, we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention. And I'm seeing some of the responses from your early remarks, and one of our viewers and watchers say, well, can we really say World War III? Is this just kind of clickbait that we're using such a language for? You're laughing.
Well, I hope that person is correct. I hope that this does not occur, but it would be naive to have command of the airwaves and talking about this very critical crisis and not raise the specter, as Sister Nura Muhammad said, that on the one side, you have a country with 5,000 nuclear warheads. On the other side, you have a country with 6,000 nuclear warheads. We also know that Russia has these hypersonic missiles, which I understand is not part of the U.S. arsenal, which gives them even more of an advantage. I mean, there have been headlines in recent months in the buildup to this conflict about Russian submarines cruising off the Atlantic coast. So if you live between Boston and Atlanta, you may want to pay attention to this. I'm not trying to engage in scaremongering. I'm not trying to engender clickbait. I'm trying to say that this is a very serious crisis, and it's well past time for people to start paying attention. Or if you're not able to pay attention, make sure your political representatives and your intellectual leaders are paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Farajii, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That just brought me to the thought. Oh my gosh, now I've lost my thought, Farajii. OMG. I was like, oh no, let me back up. Let me not say anything. But I mean, this is very serious when you talk about the fact that they did not even expect Putin to invade as soon as he did. This is what analysts are saying. They didn't expect him to invade as soon as he did. They thought that this was months, in advance. They were like, what? This is happening already? So again, we can be naive and we can say, oh, World War III is not going to happen. But again, this is a country, a nation that has over 6,000 nuclear weapons and that are saying to the rest of the world, don't get involved. This is between Ukraine and I. For Putin to even use that language, this man is not backing down. He's serious. And we have to take it serious before it's too late.
Rashad, what's your take on this? And that's a good point. Rashad, what's your take, sir?
No, I agree with everything that Dr. Horn has said and Sister Nura Muhammad has said as well. I think that this conversation is critical. It's timely. I love the fact that we are making it make sense and using plain language in those that are not as politically informed, because it is an issue, and the fact that it is being diluted through other things. And the work that I do across the city with young people and young adults is that it is being muzzled by the other things that are streaming on their timelines that are not being lifted up through algorithms and other things that attest to people's interests, right, in their capacity to stay focused on what is of the higher order. I think this is critical in itself, and I think that these conversations need to continuously happen because, like Dr. Horn said, there is close proximity to our direct lives and where we are stationed and living at right now in the United States, that we will be impacted directly and immediately and in real time right now for these implications of other countries and the possibility of war and what the involvement of the U.S. will be. Again, like we said in previous conversations, that politics needs to be made simple to the fact that we all understand what is being pieced out at the tables, right? Because we're all at this table for some reason. But if we're not aware of what we're dieting and what's on the menu, then when you look up, we are the ones that are being feasted upon.
And that's one of the big things I think, Rashad, that we all have to kind of keep in mind is that, you have a generation of folks that are not politically savvy. They don't understand the foreign policy. And Dr. Horn, when people are listening to our discussion today, I'm sure that many people are asking the question, well, what do I do? Are there any organizations or are there any institutions that we as the American people can say, we want to voice our concern. We want to encourage this government to use the best of intelligence and diplomacy before getting into an egotistical spat with this Russian leader. I don't think that people want to go to war, Doc. I really don't think that the American people, we're not ready to go to war. I don't believe we have the capacity to go to war at this point. We certainly don't have the political will to go to war at this point. How can people address this and let the United States government know that regardless of what happens, do not bring the United States into this war?
Well, your point is well taken. What we're doing on the air right now is a gigantic step forward, but obviously this discussion we're having needs to be replicated and duplicated in student unions and student organizations and tenant associations and labor unions in particular, because labor unions in this country are a sleeping giant. There are more Black people who are members of labor unions than civil rights organizations. They pay dues regularly, oftentimes monthly, sometimes weekly, and oftentimes they have lobbying arms in Washington, D.C. But unfortunately, oftentimes they do not address foreign policy, or if they do address foreign policy, they take the wrong position. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm happy that you've invited me into this important discussion, and I certainly look forward to speaking with your audience again.
Dr. Gerald Horne, we are so happy and we're thankful that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to talk to us, to give us some insight and to give us some guidance on how to move forward with having this conversation, and most importantly, some of the big things we need to look out for. So Dr. Horne, thank you so much, sir, for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, more conversation. Stay with us. It's The Culture here only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. I want to bring in my culture crew member Rashad Staten because I think that the discussion that we just had with Dr. Gerald Horn is very important. I want us to move on to another story, but I just feel, Rashad, that that people understand the severity of the situation, and we just can't. I know it's very easy. Let's also bring back culture crew member Nira Muhammad. I know it's very easy, crew, for us to act as if certain things are not happening, right? But I just can't help but to feel like this doesn't feel like a controlled situation.
Correct.
This feels like, Rashad, this feels like a situation that can go left, like
real quick,
real quick,
unexpectedly,
real fast, and as I see people chatting on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page, and people are talking about the history of these countries and these nations and the relationships and the dynamics of power. I'm not too sure if this situation is going to really stay calm enough where America will not be pulled in.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, brother Farajii. I think what we as Americans must do, regardless of the color line or what hue that we have, is understand the country in which we are and the stature of our country, that America itself is not the leading country or the number one country in a lot of different factors in which we once were. We're not the military giant that we once was, that we have other countries that have built their fortitude in military expansion and global expansion and also economically, as well as far as even academics, that America, what we once pride ourselves on, is now in a competitive nature that a lot of our power has been minimized or reduced over the last 50 or so years, that we must be vigilant, that if we are to still carry this big brother mentality in foreign policy, that we must be really honest with ourselves. Is, are we ready for it? And is the American people informed enough to make the conscious decision and informed enough to hold our elected officials from the federal government down to our electoral personnel, that we're mindful that we want to be on the right side of the ladder, right? And these direct implications is one in itself. I think and we are often so, I want to say, Americanized, that we think that nothing can directly impact us. But in this situation, we will be directly impacted, in which we are. So how do we begin in these conversations that we don't get distracted by who scored enough points in this sports competition, that we're talking about how politics and foreign relations is going to impact what's in our refrigerators. It's going to impact our educational system. It's going to impact all of our ways of life that we have often took for granted, that we can no longer take for granted in the real time, which is now.
I would agree with you. And Nira, I want to, when we think about, and I keep going back to using this word because I just feel like at the end of the day, this is going to create a ripple effect. The implications of all that we're seeing coming from Moscow, Washington, from Kyiv in the Ukraine. I mean, the implications of everything it feels, I could be totally wrong, but it feels like we about to carry on a burden on our shoulders that we aren't prepared to carry. It feels like we're in a time right now, and we're still in the middle of dealing with mask mandates. We're still trying to figure out, we got an election coming up in the next few months for a lot of these things, and now we're on the precipice of being drawn into a war. It feels heavy, Nira.
It feels heavy because it is heavy. The world is changing. The world is changing. So we have to change along with it. We have to be cognizant of what's going on. I think Brother Rashad said it he said it so eloquently. We have to wake up. Down to our refrigerators. What we put in our refrigerators is being impacted. Our day to day is being impacted. Inflation is happening. And guess what? That minimum wage, that $15 minimum wage, that still isn't really enough for many Americans to even afford a two-bedroom apartment. So we have to be cognizant that these things, we don't think that they impact us, but they do on such a deep and fundamental level. This is scary. Russia has over 6,000 nuclear weapons. It's that scary. But I can tell you what, I truly do believe that the citizens of Russia are going to be very, very pivotal in this moving forward, because they're going to have a lot to say, and they do have a lot more control than I believe they think that they have in terms of what Russia does, because Russia is going to need its people and its citizens to back them. And so that's going to be a big, big thing that we need to pay close attention to moving forward, is how the Russian people are handling their own government and moving forward.
I think, and I would agree with you. I do believe that the average Russian citizen has to step into their power, and I believe that it may. I believe, and just because of what we've been seeing over the past 3 to 5 years, that is going to come from the next generation. It's going to come from 20, 30, 40-year-olds, right?
Yeah,
Who are
those people that are out there protesting right now.
Yeah, those who are more, I would say, more conscious of one's humanity. You know what I mean? I truly believe there is a great consciousness that has emerged, not just in America, but around this globe, from the next generation, where we're starting to see seeing some pushback on this. I think it's important that we use our voices here in America, and I'm going to certainly use the platform here that we've been afforded here on the Black Star Network through the culture, that we can't go into no war. I want to be very clear and simple about this. America, we cannot go into war dealing with this situation. And if we don't raise the voice, if we don't become the chorus of resistance in this situation, I feel like, once again, we're going to be lied to. We're going to be taken advantage of. Propaganda is going to be used.
Farajii, let me give you some data.
We can't go to war.
Let me give you some data real quick, though. When it comes to nuclear warheads, Russia stands at 6,255. The U.S. 5,550. Then guess what? After us, that's China. They only have 350. So we're the only nation that's even close to being able to fight against Russia. Just looking at the numbers in terms of nuclear warheads, no other nation even comes close. Look at that. 6,255 for Russia, 5,550 for the US, and then in third place is China with only 350.
But it's a concern.
No one else has even. I mean, they still are almost 1,000 more than what we have, and then as Dr. Horn mentioned, they have a little bit more advanced technology than what we have. But we're only chance though. Like in terms of nuclear weaponry, the U.S. is the only one who's even coming close to what Russia has built up.
Well, let's add to this. Let's add to this very quickly, Nara, because you bring it up absolutely valid point. Let's add to that. Let's add to the fact that we are also a part of a culture of ignorance, where when information comes out, we automatically are becoming very skeptical, regardless of what the source may be. Let's add to the fact that we believe we know better, so that we can't be taught, we can't be enlightened, we can't be educated about anything, right? There's this culture that we have to penetrate to even get things started. We're still dealing with a culture, like I said earlier, we're fighting over mask mandates and all of those other things. And I'm not talking about all of that right now, but I'm just talking about the culture where it is hard to get people to think sanely about a situation as severe as war. Even though we know it's serious. But you got to connect the dots to people, like, gas prices, food costs, education, technology with the cyber attacks. You got to help people connect the dots because the culture of ignorance is so pervasive in this country that we don't and we can't see through it. We can't see over it, can't see past it. Go ahead, Rashad. That's the concern that I have, though, bro. That's the concern that I really have.
My exact same sentiments of uncertainty and not being in a space of accountability to this larger matter that's going to directly impact humanity is one that I can only speak to my lived experience in the proximity of me. But I know for certain that I wasn't introduced to foreign policy and education until I got to college, right? And that in itself is a privilege, and that itself that attests to exposure and accessibility, right? So even if we're going through historical analysis and understanding history and its implications, we're taught governmental structures, but then do we understand governmental structures as it connects to foreign policy and how those relationships and things work? That when we sit down and we talking to our peers and we're speaking into our communities, our folks are uninformed because it's not a part of our everyday structures, societies, and how we've been educated, which then means it's a conversation that goes over a lot of people's heads. And it's a conversation that I don't have time for because I once never been informed of it and how it directly impacts us. But that is a space where we don't have time to go back. How do we ramp it up now to make it make sense for the folks right here? And I think that we are actually doing our part, and we can consistently do a part in this because it's not going anywhere. And what we all know is that a war doesn't end overnight, and the implications are not going to be there directly in real time, but they will foster consequences for generations to come, right? And I think that is the most scariest and uncertain part, that is in a space where we're being indoctrinated with so many different things that we cannot pinpoint what if of certain urgency right now, while we are always being distracted to things that really don't matter at all. A celebrity, we can't have a celebrity go in this time to tell us what to do. We can't offer the fact that we want our athletes to be our role models. No, this is an issue that deals with our intellects, our academia, our elected officials, and the powers that be, that often a lot of people around in our neighborhoods and from our grandparents to our great-grandparents can't recognize the names of these larger entities that are controlling the global market.
And you want to add to that, Rashad? And Nira, this is something that I know that is important and valuable to you, is what Dr. Horn said, getting your intellectuals to get on board with this. I mean, we see all of this is happening. We're having this conversation. But when we get, and this is like, we got to bring the intellectuals, the Black intelligentsia, has to be a part of the conversation about war and the impact that it will have on Black and brown and minority communities in this country, right? Like Black people leadership, like Dr. Horn talked about, civil rights institutions, your NAACP, your Urban League. Minister Farrakhan is going to be speaking this weekend for Savior's Day. He may speak on this. We don't know, but we know he has used that platform before to speak out against war. I mean, these things, there has to be a chorus from every aspect of Black life, the Pan-Africanness, those who are fighting for reparations. Hell, the conversation around reparation, it ain't going to go so far because all the money is being spent on war.
And when we talk about how we're not impacted by these wars, this isn't our fight, this isn't our problem. When you look at it from that lens, you start to realize, wait a minute. If the money is going to war, then how can we have a conversation of reparations? So we are directly impacted by these issues. We can pretend that we aren't all that we want to, and I gotta say, we've been a little bit spoiled because we've been in a war with Afghanistan for God, how many years?
20 years.
Exactly. And we didn't feel like we were at war. Many of us Americans were able to go on with our day-to-day lives, not even realizing that we were at war. So we got to look at this. Is not the same situation. Russia is not Afghanistan. Russia has nuclear power, the most nuclear power than any other nation in the world. So this is not to be taken lightly. This is not a game. But I also want to show our people some grace. Because again, as Rashad mentioned, we didn't even learn about foreign policy until we got to college. So we do have to show our people a little bit of grace, and we do have to rely on those institutions and our elected officials to keep us abreast with what is going on, because our people are operating from a space of ignorance, and not because they don't want to know, but simply because they aren't educated on it.
And look, let me tell you,
our people.
Look, and not to interrupt her, I'm just saying, by the God's permission and grace, I want to continue to use this platform to put out there. And, you know, just like we saw the ongoing conversations about COVID, I hope that we can get those brilliant minds to talk about war and the impact that it has on the Black community, right? On all different levels, because this is just the very beginning. This is just the tipping point. But we gotta bring those voices on to show people, to show our people, and to show other communities and groups of people that this ain't the move right now. I don't see it being the move, but I mean, look, if we don't stand for something, what's the old saying? If you don't stand for something, you're gonna fall for anything. And at this point, don't give us the okie doke and use lies and use deceptive tactics and create a narrative of evil and other propaganda to influence us to go into a war that we may not be able to win. That's the thing. That's the thing. Because guess what? And people say, well, why are you concerned like that? Because guess whose bodies are going to be on the front line? It ain't going to be the senators' sons and daughters. It's going to be the poor, Black people, Latinos, and white people. This is going to be the misinformed of the nation. It's going to be the ignorant of our people. And I'm not saying ignorant to throw shade. I'm saying those who just don't know, who thinking that they come and going to serve the greater interests of the country only to be used as pawns. Man.
I just think this is very serious too, Farajii, because at the end of the day, this is not a war that anyone wants to go into. Again, Putin has told everybody to stay out of it, but I think it comes down to our humanity. It comes down to the Ukraine being considered, as you mentioned earlier, being a brotherly nation. I mean, do these people deserve to have their country invaded by Putin, who simply is just saying, I'm doing this because I don't want you guys to be independent. Oh, you guys want to join NATO? That's a direct violation. I'm coming to invade. I mean, these are people who are, these are families that are literally sleeping in subway stations right now. Now, children with their families on floors in subway stations. There are people that are stuck in traffic right now for hours because they've been trying to flee the Ukraine. So we need to take a moment to just put ourselves in their shoes. If that was my family, my son, my daughter, you, sleeping in a subway station simply because another country decided they want to own us. I just want us to take a moment to just think about that.
Yeah.
Because I know we get so caught up in the political side of things, and rightfully so. But I also wanted to look at this from a humanitarian perspective as well, even if it's just for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do need to kind of step up and to use our to use our empathy, right? To understand what folks are going through. And for me, Rashad, it's not about the color of your skin. You know, I think, you know, we all have been what's the word? Educated, for lack of a better word, right? About the trials and the struggles and the tribulations of Black people in this country. Each one of us here, we know that. But then when you start to look at the struggle of Black people, and then you learn about the struggle of other people, your struggle of Black people should not prevent you from feeling the pain of other people.
Yeah. You know, this conversation reminds me. I always say it's nothing new under the sun. It seems in a space of now of the war in Vietnam, right? When we had our actual intellects, our civil rights leaders, our athletes all taking a firm stance, and it was an unconventional and an unorthodox stance at that time because they tried to call them treasons, a fact of treason for not going into favor with that leadership of the country wanted at the time, but understood the humanity of what we were dealing with on our own soil to understand the humanity of the implications if we were to invade others and cause that same war. And I think what we need now is that same type of leadership, that same type of approach of speaking outside of just ourselves, but speaking on the whole larger picture. That no, this war in itself will have implications, and we're still living through the implications of the Vietnam War,
Come
right?
on, brother.
Understanding that while we're still dealing with the loss of billions of people from our Afghanistan war through our invasion when we went into Iran and the other things, that do we really have the capacity, the bandwidth, and the humanity to still deal with this and going into war when we're dealing in a global pandemic in a fight that, yes, America has to have a role, but do we take it into a role of military weaponry? That may not be our stance. That may not be the most advantageous way in a space where we just don't have it as a people. And like you said, maybe this conversation is something that will be resolved with a next generation that is ideal towards humanity itself. But the old guard approach in the way in the world is now, one of the two got to give. Because at this point, we are continuously being bombarded and pulled in polar opposite directions that no one has a clarity on what the world will look like tomorrow. To wake up today and that the bombing of the airport in itself being on my timeline just mad.
Come on, brother.
It went straight into prayer, right? And this was not a prayer for me, but this was a prayer for the world, right? Because this is a world issue. And
this is a world issue, brother. And Rashad, I couldn't agree with you more, dear brother, because you know, at the end of the day, man, like we know suffering firsthand as Black people, right? And I mean, nearer to your point, you imagine waking up and you hearing bombs over your house, man. Or I mean, seriously, look at these images. At the end of 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, and you know what I mean? Imagine if you're waking up for prayer, for meditation, for yoga, and you're hearing bombs over your home, man. All because of a lust, an inordinate lust for power. I mean, this thing gets so deep. And it's not just a political, like you said, Nira, it's not just a political thing, but it's also in the thinking of an individual who believes that, you know what, I can go in and I can destroy. And this is it. And look, we can talk about you.
We are one sovereign. We are one land.
But see, check this out.
For him to even say that, it's like you're delusional. And
but here's the thing, though. The thing is, that same mind exists in the United States of America.
United States of America, Farajii.
You see what I'm saying?
Africa.
You see what I'm saying?
All of Africa was literally broken up, and no leader from Africa was in the room at the table. So this is not something new. Rashad, you know, you can attest to that too. The colonization of Africa. This is what Europe does, though. This is what Europe does. Europe decides, I want this piece of land. I'm gonna take it. This is not new. How do you think America became America? They decided to invade this land. They decided we're gonna take it from the native people, and they did. If you look at Africa, you can literally look at a map of Africa and you can see which parts of Africa were broken up and taken by which country. They literally had sat at a table where all the figureheads from around the world sat down and discussed Africa with not one African leader in that room. Not one. And they took it.
And look, and can we bring it up, dear? Can we bring it up to modern times?
France still owes money.
Can we, and exactly, and let's bring it up to modern times, because this is and just to add to what you're saying to that history. Remember when America went into, and this is look, folks. So I know this is getting to be a deep situation. We got a few moments left in the show, but do y'all remember how the neocons of this country talked about the Middle Eastern region, and how they were planning to go into the Middle East and destroy Saddam Hussein? They destroyed America destroyed and killed Muammar Gaddafi, and set the circumstances. They didn't kill him, but they created the circumstances. And I mean, see how they gone into the Middle East and just disrupted the Islam, the Muslims' way of life in the Middle East. We seen that, you said, in Africa.
We've seen Nicaragua.
We've seen Nicaragua. We've seen it down in South America.
Black community.
And look, and come on. Let's talk about the fact of the move bombing of in Philadelphia back in 1985, I believe. And they still trying to regain and restore.
Farajii, you could break this joint down.
I mean, we're breaking this thing down because
we could talk about Rosewood.
We could talk about all of that.
Black communities that have been destroyed. This is the nature of a people.
And look, we know firsthand. We know firsthand when wickedness gets into power, what the end result will be. And I'm saying that to be very serious, crew. And I'm saying it to all our watchers, that we have to be the chorus to raise up our voices to say, enough is enough, America. Enough is enough to the hypocrisy, to the injustice. I mean, whether you're talking to Russia or whether you're talking to America, or whether you're talking to anybody, but enough is enough. And I know if this country gets closer to war, I was always taught by my leading teacher that if you get too closer to war, that your voice will start to get muted. You can't speak out. So we have to be cognizant and use the daylight while we can to speak out against any injustice. Because the injustice that we have experienced in this country has prepared us to be the very necessary freedom fighters to fight the injustice all over the world. Folks, I got to stop right there. I want to thank my dynamic culture crew. Rashad, thank you so much, big brother. Always appreciate your insight. My wife, Nira Muhammad. Make sure y'all check out her podcast, Queen Talks with Nira, streaming on all platforms. She talks about very serious issues. And I thank y'all, each one of you, for joining us for this conversation. Many of you have been posting in our chat on YouTube and Facebook, and I thank you so much. And I hope that we really said something to help us to activate and spark something within you to think clearly about this situation. We are going to be taking a look at all of the many dynamics of the situation over these next few days and however long that needs to be, but we're going to take a look at this. And I certainly thank our very special guest, Dr. Gerald Horne, for joining us today. All right. Make sure you support us. If you enjoyed this conversation today, if you enjoyed the level of insight and the coverage that we gave, and most importantly, the discussion about the impact on us in this country, make sure you support us here at Black Star Network. Go to blackstarnetwork.com and do your due diligence. Give something to support Black-owned media that is unbiased, unapologetic, media that is going to keep you, the Black listener, the Black watcher, in mind in every single conversation. You can support us via Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, so many other platforms. Make sure that you watch every show. Check out my big brother, Dr. Greg Carr, The Black Table, airing tomorrow. Then on the beginning of the week, join Sister Deborah Owens for Get Wealthy. Join Dr. Jackie Hood so she could teach you a balanced life. Look, there's no beef between us here because we are all part of the same network we're all working toward the same goal, and that's to empower and enlighten you to make your life and you make your community and to make this world a better place. I thank each and every one of you. I'm so blessed and humbled that you were able to tune in today. Make sure you stay tuned at the 6 o'clock hour. Of course, my big brother Roland Martin, Unfiltered. Stay tuned for that. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture, only on the Black Star Network. Peace.